This quarry exhibit was developed to tell the story of an industry that played a significant part in the history of Stone Mountain. And a man named Jerry Deegan was chosen to create it. Stone Mountain was quarried from the 1850s through the 1970s. This railroad was used to carry granite outside of Stone Mountain. The granite here was shipped all over the world. It was used for Federal Gold Depository at Fort Knox, the Panama Canal, the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo, and in the foundations of the Lincoln Memorial, just to name a few. I'm very familiar with one of these, the post office in Jamaica, New York. Many times I've touched that counter and I know that was granite. So this is where it came from. Another building that I'm familiar with is the Miami-Dade County Courthouse. That's a very old building, and I've been in there. And virtually every state had a building that uses Stone Mountain granite. The plaque on the wall under the bridge here commemorates the old train, the old steam train. Around the mountain, the spur line around the mountain operated until 1942 when the tracks were pulled up and given to the war scrap metal drive. The railroad, see here, was a part of the original spur. The walk-in deck going towards the quarry exhibit is pretty interesting. It looks like railroad ties that were covered up. And then it gets to a point where you can start seeing the quarry just up ahead. As we enter the exhibit area, straight in front of you, you see the quarry. That is the quarry. Just imagine 7,645,700 cubic feet of granite were removed from that area right there, that whole side of the mountain. This equals to 1 foot long paving stones stretching from North Pole to the South Pole. That's 12,444 miles. Here's a look at the one side of the mountain where the quarries were. If you take a close look at the ledges, you can still see the chisel marks. You will see some of those in the displays, the big stones that they have in this exhibit. Here's a small one. It looks like a curb, but there's the chisel marks on all the edges. This is a beautiful stone here. It's almost finished and ready for polish. A large photo shows a day at work. Here's a huge piece that's been broken away from the mountain successfully, and it's ready to be cut. You can imagine the size of this stone just by looking at the men that are standing on it. This is an above ground quarry. I'm not sure if that's the right term, what to call it, but underground quarries were a lot more harder to extract the material from. Splitting the stones was done differently in the early days. It was done by driving wooden wedges into the cracks and then wetting them down. It would expand. It would just split away the stone. Then later on they started doing it with iron wedges, I guess, 2 pieces of metal, and then drive another one through the middle to split away the stone. And then later on the air power tools came on, which changed the whole industry. Okay, different cuts, and especially straight cuts, were done by a chalk line. Lots of laborers were hired to help the quarrymen to do the heavy lifting. This is an early picture of how the cranes and pulleys helped with the lifting. The blacksmith shop was used to customize tools, harden the iron while sharpening it. Here's a nice picture of some of the men that worked at the quarry. Here they are shown cutting curbing and pavers. There are also a powder house near the quarry to store explosives. Gee, that must have been it. I don't know, that looks kind of close. Quarry labor, it talks about the men, the heat they put up with, the danger, and the wages. And right next to that, there's a display on how they do it today. Not surprisingly, the first stone that was quarried out of this quarry here was for gravestones. Until later on, more demand came from buildings, for pavers, and of course steps, tiles, counters. Looks like a rock crusher to make gravel with the leftover rubble. Dry docks, Panama Canal Zone, 1904. This is an interesting timeline. That the mountain had a tower, some kind of tower on top when it was privately owned. This timeline is from 1845 to 1945, and it's definitely worth reading. And then it extends to 1978, which was the last year that they quarried. These are the tools of the trade. Going back as time progressed, and that's interesting how they dynamited, chiseled, air chiseling, and chiseling, unbelievable. This is a blasting machine for when the dynamite era came around, and forge, and all the air tools that came as time went by. The jackhammer finally broke the camel's back, though. This exhibit is a great tribute to the men who worked this quarry from the late 1800s to the late 1970s. Here's another example of some chisel marks on a large stone here. And then we have another perfect example of a chisel that got stuck in the rock and was never taken out. That's it for the quarry. Stay tuned for more Stone Mountain coming up. You guys have a great day.